liberating structures in facilitating Scrum events. And the thing we are going to look at is how we can improve people's engagement, improve the value creation. What can you do as a leader about this? Let's discuss then some of the liberating structure, how we can use it in Scrum. And finally, looking at what happens if we scale Scrum up or out. And the first statement here tonight is really, we postulate that we need to improve people's engagement to improve value creation. A lot of talk has been going on about this in the later months here. There's a lot of coverage in the press also in general about how do we get people to engage post-corona. A lot of focus on how do we involve people. And those of you who've been around here before know that we talk an awful lot about complexity, and that because our work is complex, no single individual can save the day, but we have to be together. We have to work in teams, and we have to get people's engagement. And there's someone here who has formulated a law, Dora's law. We need teams of missionaries, not team of mercenaries. And for the English speakers, that is probably self-evident what that means. So teams of missionaries are engaged, motivated, have deep understanding of the context, and they have empathy with the customer or the user of it. Whereas mercenaries have no real sense of empowerment and accountability, no real passion for the problem to be solved, and little real connection with the actual users. So let's take that as a statement and the reason why we are introducing also the liberating structures. First, a little bit of background before we get to the real meat. It's just an appetizer. Gallup have been examining this this engagement business for decades, in fact, more than 20 years. And it turns out that only 15% of employees are engaged. 85% are disengaged, which means they sort of sit on the back seat. They do normally what they're told and come to work and leave at regular hours, etc., but they're not really there with all their capacity. There are 18% that are actively disengaged, hanging around the water cooler and the coffee machine, spreading messages contrary to where we really want to go. Now, this is a terribly scary number, and most people don't believe it. And when Christian and I presented this in Norway to a company, and people were sort of saying, well, clearly, these are American numbers. We are Norway. We're much better. And there was one of them, no, I have an article here from the local business newspaper, and we are exactly, together with Denmark and Sweden, on the global average. Western Europe are really bad. It's actually below sub-Saharan Africa. So engaged, that means we are involved and enthusiastic about our work. We look forward to it. We drive performance, innovation. We move it forward. Not engaged, unattached, decoupled. They're putting time, not energy and passion into their work. Well, before we always were told that that employers were buying our time. Today we try to buy more than time. We try to buy energy and passion. Yeah, and employees aren't just unhappy with work; they're resentful that they're not being met. Then these are not, and so they're acting out their unhappiness. Western Europe is at a shocking low. So Western Europe, there are only 10% of employees that are engaged. 19 are actively disengaged. So we need to equip our colleagues, our employees, to perform, and then we need to position them so they can be successful. Here's a link. You'll get this afterwards, so you can click the link and read the Gallup numbers yourself. Gallup based this on this old questionnaire that I'm sure some of you have seen. It's called the Q12 questionnaire. And what Gallup talks about is how this is the best, after all their research, their best measurement of engagement that they could come up with. And what we learn from them is that when we look at that database, they have the most engaged compared with the least engaged, the top quarter with the lowest quarter, as some interesting numbers that goes directly to the bottom line of any organization. Lower absenteeism, higher customer metrics, higher profitability, and a huge change in safety incidents, for example, and stress related and illness, etc., is much, much lower between those that Gallup measure to be in the top quartile. The COVID pandemic has globally led to a dramatic drop in engagement. In the US, quite a lot. Leaders and managers are affected the most. Our work routines are unsettled. And the other thing that has come to the surface is that engagement also is very closely related to have an inclusive culture, which of course is the rage of the day. So here's a statement from Gallup also: improving employee engagement starts with clarity among leaders and managers. So it starts there. And there's just a number of how many have been involved in that. And it's, I mean, this is something that's been going on for 20 years. So it's not something Arne and I invented over the last weekend. These are serious numbers. And they also quote, and we can quote, that employee engagement, if you can measure that, that's an even stronger predictor of performance when we have hard times. Now, we have hard times with the COVID crisis. We are probably in front of some bubble burst in the economy at some time. And so therefore, there's not much better we can invest in companies and in work. The thing here also in the second bullet point at the bottom is workplace burnout is reduced to almost zero if people are engaged. Now that's interesting. People don't burn out by being engaged. They burn out by being frustrated. What is frustration? That is when you are hindered in your meaningful and objectful object-oriented work, and you can't do it, then you're frustrated. So what we have learned is that we have to pay an enormous attention to that people are healthy. And that includes, of course, both physically and mentally. Now, we're not dealing with the physical healthiness and tonight and serving the right dish in the cafeteria, but trying to cover just that little spot of what has to do with the mental health of feeling included and appreciated where you are. As Amy Edmondson say about psychological safety being one of the core factors here that she writes a lot about, professor from Harvard, fundamentally, each of us have to, we want to feel in our daily work, it's okay to be me here. And therefore, what can you do in an organization like this? What can you do as a leader, as maybe a Scrum Master in the team, as someone who has responsibility for an organization? Let's start with a statement, the very first statement here: choose to be a gardener, not the chess master. This comes from General Stanley McChrystal, who was sent to Iraq in 2003 and completely upended the American Army's command and control system because they couldn't match Al-Qaeda. And he said, I had to give up being the chess master, moving the pieces around, and be the gardener, which was a humbling fact for a 50-year-old four-star general, to be the gardener. But this was all I could do, prepare the soil for this to grow. And there is no place for using fear in the management instrument, as a management instrument. Frederick the Great of Prussia, who probably wasn't that great, but he had this statement that discipline is when the soldiers fear their own officers more than the enemy. And I have known a CEO or two that lived by that rule. And well, you can get people to do tasks, but you can't get them to engage. So, okay, be the gardener. Focus on the vision. Make sure that you actually allocate funds for this. Be prepared to invest in this activity because it is something that goes directly to the bottom line. And then build an optimal organization for the common good. I would propose that an organization needs to be looking for the common good, not just shareholder value, but you need to look for a balanced value for stakeholders, customers, and employees, and society at large. But there has to be a focus on that. And therefore, we use what we call here inviting and liberating structures to allow people to engage, to allow them to focus on their intrinsic motivation, purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And then we set the right operating units, and we are prepared to handle challenges because they will come. Although we are positively and optimistically creating a good organization, we're doing everything, challenges will come and crises will come. But that's where we focus on this. Be the gardener. And here's some important people that have said clever things about this. Amy Edmondson first. High psychological safety enables learning. No one gets punished for admitting a mistake. No one gets punished for asking for help. No one gets punished for suggesting a better way of doing things. It's okay to be me here. And we have, sorry, there's some noise, background noise here. Trust-based shared goals and values. And we can quote Robert Putnam here. And he says, this comes from prolonged experience of trustworthiness. So be prepared that this will take some time. But when you have that, you have what he calls high social capital. If you really have trust and shared goals and values, you can operate at lightning speed. Because he says that if you have shared norms and values that promote cooperation and trust, then we can avoid a lot of cost, extreme efficiency, because of the low transaction and monitoring costs. And an example that he uses is from the diamond market in New York City, which is largely run by Orthodox Jews. And okay, there are its own challenges to be in that community, and it's probably quite restrictive in many ways. But one thing he says is, there is one thing for sure, you don't cheat each other there. So they can operate at an absolute minimum of transaction costs. They don't need to involve lawyers in a trade. They don't need to monitor whether the parties you agreed with will do it. If you can trust each other, if you can trust that party that you asked to do something, that this person will do it. And that's why in all self-organizing systems and so on, we always want to promote the idea of upholding your commitments. No one can use force against another. Everyone sticks to their commitments. So I'm almost done now. Intrinsic motivation, Anders Dusvik in Norway, purpose, autonomy, mastery, these are the main things. So what are the toolbox? Here's the toolbox for the Agile Gardener. And what we want to introduce now, there are many tools to choose from, and there are many other things than just this liberating structures. But this particularly is a framework created by two gentlemen, powerful ways to cooperate, intended to boost collaborative team interaction, and it's an alternative to traditional structures. What are the traditional structures? There are 5 conventional ways that we normally do meetings and discussions and whatever, and they are either presentations, managed discussions, open discussions, status report, or brainstorm, and they don't work very well. We'll talk a little bit about that, and you can study more afterwards. Liberating Structures adds 33 more methods you can choose to use from. And that's what we're heading into now. These are the 33. We won't talk about them here, but I think we will switch gear here and let Arne take it from here. Is that correct, Arne? That you will be ready to jump in? Muted.
I'm ready to jump in, and
right.
I'm gonna shift my camera and show you a little about Scrum, because what we want to talk about is how can we use liberating structures to help specifically in the different events in Scrum. And in Scrum, we have a large event called a sprint, and that contains sprint planning, where we're supposed to decide how much work to bring into a sprint, and set the goal for the sprint and plan how to accomplish that goal. And then on a daily basis, we have a daily Scrum event where we check our progress towards the sprint goal and identify possible problems that we need to take away. We call them impediments. Then a lot of work, we build an increment, and at the end of the sprint, we have 2 events with the purpose of inspection and adaptation. During the sprint review, which contains a demonstration of the increment that we have built in the sprint, we inspect the increment and we possibly adapt our high-level product plans for the future. Those are usually kept in the product backlog. And during the retrospective, which is the last event of each sprint, and each sprint is maximum 1 month, we inspect our ways of working and we adapt our ways of working. We identify things that we can do to be even better in future sprints than we have been so far. And we also have an ongoing activity in Scrum called product backlog refinement. And the purpose of product backlog refinement is to get the details just in time. We don't necessarily add all the details to the high-level product backlog up front. We want to get the details just in time. And these 4, sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, and retrospective, I will talk about. And I will talk about them from the perspective of liberating structures. And here is my way of explaining what liberating structures are. A set of facilitation techniques, and the purpose of these is to involve individuals and to unleash the potential of individuals and teams. And you can, of course, expand team. Usually, if we talk about Scrum, we talk about teams of 10 or less, the size of 10 or less, but you can have larger groups of people also when you want to unleash the potential of individuals and larger groups. So this was a little about the Scrum events and my high-level description of liberating structures to accomplish or add to what Kurt said. So now I'm going to return to my seat in front of my computer. I'm going to change camera and I'm going to start presenting, and that's a good idea how I do that. I know how to do it, but I just want to make sure that I present the right thing here. So here we go. In presentation mode, what we will do now is to talk about how you can use a sample of liberating structures in the different Scrum events. And liberating structures, once again, easy to learn microstructures. They are helping us to enhance relational coordination and trust. Kurt talked about trust before. They are designed to quickly foster lively participation in groups of any size. In Scrum, of course, we talk often about the team with a 10 size, and lively participation is good in many situations, not the least in complex situations where we often apply Scrum to deal and help us to deal with complex realities, because one way of dealing with a complex environment is to invite different perspectives, lively participation, encourage dissent as well, because there is not only one correct answer in a complex environment. We want to make it possible to truly include and unleash everyone. And what the people behind Liberating Structures say is that it can help us to get to a disruptive innovation. And as Kurt was talking about before, they can replace more controlling or constraining approaches. If we put all of this together, we see what they write on the website of Liberating Structures. So if we then turn to the different Scrum events and we start with sprint planning, here are a couple of liberating structures that I believe can help us in sprint planning. So the purpose of sprint planning in Scrum is to define a sprint goal and to plan the work in the sprint. And now I'm going back and forth. That was not on purpose. So one liberating structure is called 15% solutions. And this is to help us discover and focus on what each person on a team or in a group has the freedom and resources to do right now. And the 20 minutes that you will see and similar timing is how long does it take to do this liberating structure. One of the great advantages of Scrum, if you ask me, is that we get started. And 15% solutions is a way to get started. Another liberating structure that we can use during the sprint planning is called min specs. And that is about specifying only the absolute must-dos and must-not-dos for achieving a purpose. So if we start sprint planning by defining our sprint goal, then using min specs is a way to decide what is the absolute minimum that we can do to meet the sprint goal. And that's actually good. One principle from Agile is about the art of maximizing the work not done. They talk about simplicity, and this is in line with that. And since sprint planning can be up to 8 hours long, then using 35 to 50 minutes for a min spec may be a good thing to try out. And then we talk about the sprint goal, and there is a liberating structure called 9 whys. And that is about asking why and asking why and asking why. And the purpose of this liberating structure is make the purpose of your work together clear. So if we identify a sprint goal, we can ask ourselves, why do we have this sprint goal? Well, then we come up with an answer and we can dig deeper. This, of course, can be used on a wider scale as well. So here you have a couple of examples of liberating structures that you can use to help yourself and your team to reach the purpose of a sprint planning. What we have every day, or what we should have every day, is a daily Scrum for the developers of the Scrum team to inspect their progress towards the sprint goal. And you probably do not have time to use liberating structures within the daily Scrum. But after the daily Scrum, when we want to deal with the impediments that we have identified, you could use some of these liberating structures, like 1, 2, 4, all. That is a liberating structure to engage everyone simultaneously in generating questions, ideas and suggestions. So ideas and suggestions on how to remove an impediment or how to improve something that we need to improve during the sprint. 1, 2, 4 all means we start individually, and individually we without talking to each other, we try to come up with possible questions, ideas, and suggestions. Then the 2 is we take 2 individuals and we join them into a group, a pair. And then the 4, we take 2 pairs and we join them into a group of 4. 1, 2, 4 all is also about the time boxes. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, and 5 minutes for everyone. And that's a quite rapid way of engaging many people simultaneously. During and after the liberating structure, the daily Scrum, we can of course use the min specs as well to understand what is the absolute minimum thing that we need to do to remove an impediment. And we can use the liberating structure called wise crowds. And the purpose of that is to tap the wisdom of the whole group in rapid cycles, to engage in discussions. And what you see here, it says 15 minutes per person. So if we are a group of people and there are individuals who have impediments, for example, what we can do is we ask one individual, and what is your impediment? And then we use everyone else to help generate possible solutions or possible way to remove that impediment. Usually, the individual presents the problem, and then the others, they ask clarifying questions. And then what we do is we ask the individual to turn their back to the others and just listen to what they come up with during their discussion. So 1, 2, 4 all, min specs, wise crowds can be used after daily Scrum. And what we can also do is possibly use liberating structures in connection with the sprint review. The sprint review, we want to inspect the increment that we built the last sprint, and we also want to adapt our product backlog for the future. We want to come up with new good ideas of functionality or features or requirements that will make the product even better than what we currently have in the product backlog. So this could also be about generating ideas. So 9 wise, this is then on a product level. What is the purpose of the product? What is the product goal? And make that really, really clear. That you can do at some sprint reviews, but maybe not at every, or you may not need to do it at every sprint review. Crowdsourcing, 25-10 crowdsourcing is a way to help yourself to order good ideas in a certain order, rapidly generate and sift the group's most powerful, actionable ideas. When we have ideas of what to add to the product backlog, we can use this to decide in what order is good to address the new ideas. Then, of course, you can use liberating structures in the retrospective. And as you see here, this is the first out of 3 slides. So there are many different liberating structures that, in my opinion, works very well or is very well used in retrospective. The first one that I've listed here is called TRIS. That's about some backward thinking. And we want to stop counterproductive activities and behaviors to make space for innovation. TRIS is a liberating structure to help us identify what are we doing right now that is absolutely not helping us, so that we can get rid of that. Then Troika consulting is something where we try to solve problems. We may have problems that we want to get rid of. And Troika Consulting is about getting practical and imaginative help from colleagues immediately. Usually done in troikas, 3 people, 1 person having a problem and 2 people helping out with coming up with suggestions on how to solve the problem. Could be something to think about. 9 whys could also help us during retrospective to make our overall purpose of the work clear. More wise crowds, of course, can help us. 2510 crowdsourcing can help us during the retrospective. And wicked questions is a liberating structure to articulate the paradoxical challenges that the group must confront to succeed. Sometimes we are doing things that are one by one seems very rational and very good ideas, but if you look at them together, they are kind of paradoxical. So that could help us as well. And then the last one for retrospectives, one liberating structure called what, so what, and now what. Is what is about observing, so what is about understanding why that is important, and now what is about identifying possible actions. Look back on progress to date and decide what adjustments are needed. And that fits very well with retrospective, because it's very much about this. Something called discovery and action dialogue, or DAD. So that's a tribute to all the dads around. Discover, invent, and unleash local solutions to chronic problems. Many teams, many organizations, they have chronic problems. They are aware of them, but they're not always able to get rid of them. So this is one liberating structure to help us get rid of them. And then the last one that I will talk about here is called generative relationships, STAR, the STAR. And this is about understanding how we are as a group. Reveal relationship patterns that create surprising value or dysfunctions. If we can take a look at us as a team from different aspects and see where we are right now and where we want to be, and then we may be able to come up with ideas of becoming even better in the future. So this was a quick walkthrough of different liberating structures that you can use for sprint planning, daily scrum, sprint review, and retrospective. Let's talk a little about product backlog refinement as well, before we try to use one liberating structure, all of us together here tonight. So 1, 2, 4 all you can use for product backlog refinement, and especially to generate new ideas for things to add to the product backlog. Min specs, of course, can help us, as well as it helps us during sprint planning, and the 2510 crowdsourcing can help us to understand in what order we can do all of those things that we generated. All of these, Kurt mentioned 33 different liberating structures. They can be used individually, but they can also be used in strings. And for example, you can start by generating ideas for new features to a product backlog, and you could use crowdsourcing to understand in what order to do these ideas or add them to the product backlog, and then you can use min specs to understand what is the absolute minimum we want to do for each and every of these. So strings to get extra power out of the liberating structures. So let's try one in practice. This is gonna be a little different than how you may use it in a real setting. And the one we're going to try out is called TRIS. And here is the explanation again. Stop counterproductive activities and behaviors to make space for innovation. And TRIS works like this. First of all, you identify a goal that you want to accomplish. So set a goal, and then we want to understand what we're doing today that is stopping us from reaching this goal. So next step is to generate a list. We want to understand what should we do to miserably fail reaching the goal that we set. So this is kind of going backwards. Create a fail list. What should we do to fail reaching this goal? And then the third thing, we create a list of current activities that we are doing. And especially we're trying to figure out which of those activities that we're doing have the slightest resemblance with the items on the fail list. That gives us an opportunity to identify things that we should stop doing. Not always easy, but it helps us understand that. So TRIS, set the goal, brainstorm on how to miserably fail reaching the goal, then create the current list of activities that we are doing and have resemblance of the fail with items on the fail list. There you have possible things to stop doing. So what I suggest that we do together now, we think about a goal, and the goal of Liberating Structures is to involving and unleashing everyone. So keep that goal in mind, and then we're going to do this quite quickly, just some small steps to try it out. What I would like you to do first is, on an individual basis for 1 minute, list all things that an organization or a team or individuals could do to miserably fail to involve and unleash everyone. Then I'm going to ask you to do is, after that minute, I'm going to ask you to add your thoughts to the chat. And then I will try very hard to capture those things and add to a slide in the presentation. And then what I'm going to ask you to do as step 2, list all things that you have observed currently being done in organizations or teams or groups that resembles items on the first list. Same thing here, 1 minute individually and 3 minutes to gather it. And now what I'm going to ask you to do is think for 1 minute about things that you could do, or a team could do, or an organization could do to miserably fail involving and unleashing everyone. I'll give you 1 minute to do that. Think for yourself, make notes, and then we will ask you to add them into the chat.
The goal, like reach the goal regarding.
So if we say that we have a goal that is to involve and unleash everyone, then TRIS is about first thinking about what can we do to fail reaching that goal. What should we try to do if we should avoid reaching that goal? That's what I'm asking you to list now. And that minute is over. Now, whatever you can come up with, please add it to the chat. And I already see some suggestions there, what we can do or not do to avoid reaching this particular goal. I will not be able to capture all of the things that you have written, but some of them I will be able to capture, and I will show them to you very soon. So please keep on writing, and I will capture a couple more.
We do have a recording of the chat, and before we send you out the PDF, we will include all the statements here.
Yeah, that we will do. What I'm showing you now, or will show you very soon, are some of the suggestions things that we could do to fail reaching this goal. I'm gonna see what I need to do here. Yes. Okay, so here is what I was able to capture. Some of what you wrote. So here you see things here, and you also see what is written in the chat, of course. Strict top-down management, inform on a need-to-know basis only, keep the strategy confidential to top management only, tell people off, forcing decisions on people, use fear to control people. We heard that idea before, and it's not a good idea if you ask me, but if we want to fail reaching this goal, change instructions daily, etc., etc. So I'll stop sharing this, and I will ask you to do step 2 in what we're doing here now. So from now on, what I want you to do is, for 1 minute individually, think about what have you observed in organizations that have any resemblance of the list, the items on the list that we just saw. So step 2 here, 1 minute to list things that you have observed currently being done in organizations or teams that resembles items on the first list. And then I will ask you in a minute to add that to the chat. And I'll stop sharing and ask you now to start writing in the chat. So from now on, whatever you write is about things that you see or have seen in organizations that resembles what here are a couple of the things that I noted from the first list. And what I'm asking you to think about now are these things that you have observed in your organizations, other organizations, or in teams that you have been close to or in. Then that is the second list, the current list. And I'll stop sharing that and instead reading a couple of the things that I see now. Management living upstairs, not interacting with downstairs, and command and control, manager only, lead upwards, focusing on self-promotion, are also a couple of examples. So what I will do now, I will add this to another slide and show you what we have seen here. So the thing when I copy things from the chat is that I want to take away the name of people who wrote the different things. I get that when I copy from the chat. So I'll be quick and take that away. And you will see a couple of things. And if this was an organization where we were discussing these things, then of course, now after the second list, and I'll show it to you quite soon, we would have things that were candidates, activities or behaviors that we would we would like to stop doing. So, and I like the cheap here, to the top right. Here are things that you have observed that are candidates for things to stop doing or consider stop doing. And of course, sometimes it gets funny because I managed to copy a couple of the comments that were to help you out. So, liberating structures. If you use TRIS, you usually do it in slightly different ways than we did now, usually in smaller groups, not this many people that we were. We're right now 40 people. And what I want to say as well is that now I'm gonna turn the screen to Kurt and ask him to wrap this all up. So thanks for listening and thanks for participating in the exercise. Kurt.
Thank you very much. It's I think it was as you can see, there were lots of opportunities. There was a question also, could you please repeat what is useful in that and that meeting? But you will get the PDFs afterwards, everyone, so you can see Arne's suggestion there. And that should be quite helpful. We just tasted it here. I want to say a few extra things, and then see if there are any questions in a moment. And I'll just share my screen again. Continuing a little bit, Arne has gone through the meetings of Scrum, the events in Scrum, and I just want to add to another area that I actually think is really important, still related to Scrum, and that is our dearly beloved product owner. He has other work that is pointing out from the Scrum team with the stakeholders. These liberating structures are actually great to use when he or she is interacting. And here's our standard product owner, Frank, when he works with his stakeholders, there is a lot of things here that are really helpful. You've seen most of them already. I'm particularly fond of the one called min spec, because one of the things that is very difficult for a product owner is to get to the absolute minimum, the must-haves. Stakeholders have waving their arms and we need everything. We need it now. We need it yesterday. And that's not true. But what is the real minimum that in order for this to be useful and generate value? Simple ethnography is just go out and watch what the users are doing. In the old days, we had this saying, sit by Nelly, she knows how to do it. We don't know, but go and watch her. And sometimes that's the only way to find what people really need. Design storyboards. In our Agemba solution, our software solution, we have a way of building story maps. And sometimes it's helpful to take these storyboards that you may have developed interactively on paper, crawling on the floor, writing on the wall, or whatever you do with your stakeholders, and record them and capture them in a system so you can maintain them. And the last two, critical uncertainties, forces us to think about what could possibly go wrong, so that we might be able to be slightly more resilient or guard ourselves against them. And all of these things here are, of course, ways where we are opening the door for everyone to participate. Remember, this was the whole premise of using these structures. We started with the very simple one Arne talked about, 1, 2, 4, many. That opens the door for everyone, including the deeply introvert, as some of us are, and being able to participate instead of always being overrun by the loudmouths who already have told us what the truth of this is. We are able to participate here. Critical uncertainties, sometimes you catch an outlier because there's this humble person in the corner who actually has an idea about it. And and again, what I need from you is a way of negotiating when we need something, perhaps from another team or perhaps with the stakeholders. We have this idea about Agile Lean leadership that is sort of an extension of Scrum, scaling out. We've presented it before, but for now, we'll just make this as a drawing of our value stream with multiple teams working together. I won't try and explain all of it. We've only got 4 minutes left. So we have a value stream, and we have delegation between the teams. We have resolution circles that resolves conflicts, and we have escalation and feedback going there. And we have secondary circles or communities of interest, and sometimes we have transient circles for handling crisis. Liberating structures are extremely useful there. One of them is delegation. I mean, we all know that in Agile, we really should not have delegations or handover, but in real life, we end up having to deal with it from time to time. And there, for example, it's very helpful to have delegation, and this, what I need from you. This is a principle of negotiating between peers and be sure of each other's specifications. So that is one of them that is extremely helpful to use here. Purpose to practice, primary and secondary circles, when we are trying to figure out why are we really here. In French, our raison d'être, what's our reason to exist? And very often we can also find it helpful at a company level or to look at critical uncertainties. So the collection of liberating structures can find its way into many areas of where we are trying to get input from many people. If we don't care about it and we just have made up our minds, there's no reason to go here. Just keep the old-fashioned command and control going if that's what you want. But if you want to involve people, you have to come up with a practice that also demonstrate to people this is different. People experience this is a different way of doing things. The Scrum Masters or the facilitators take charge in helping us go through this instead of just jumping in it. I can't remember whether we said it in one of the earlier slides specifically, but these are liberating structures, liberating constraints. So it's not just constraining, but it's liberating at the same time. The traditional structures are either too restrictive or too open, like a brainstorm. Oh, well, anything goes. This helps us find a balance. So that's more or less ends what we wanted to say. There's still a few slides in this. There's some links here where you can go and read the website. You don't have to buy the book. Everything is actually on the website. There's an app, there's a book, and there are some people who have written very good articles about this.
And Kurt, for those who still are interested in the book, could you show it again? I've got a question if it's in black and white or if it's a color book. I'm not sure if because I believe you have a copy of it.
The one I have is the cheap black and white book.
Okay. Yeah.
Same picture.
Thank
here.
you.
Yeah. So again, we're coming up to the full hour here, and I just wanted to say that of course we are back on stage again. December the 1st, Lisa is doing her dog and pony show, well, dog at least, and be welcome to that as well. And we also have one more coming up on the 15th, which is the real role of management in an agile organization. Of course, the other slides you can read about our education, our software, and here's a bunch of our articles on the subject of leadership. So with that, I think I will rest my case, and it's 8 o'clock. Anybody who needs to run, and we'll hang around for a little while if there are any further questions or discussions. I hope you got something out of it. I hope it gave you some ideas of doing some some pretty good changes to your environment by introducing some structures. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention.